We're going to have a string of Chilkey content over the next bit, starting with the ND TKL, a $109 pre-built TKL that serves as an evolution of the design originally introduced with ND 75 while bringing us a new form factor and new mounting system. Chilkey was kind enough to send this over for us to review, and while I do get to keep the board, no money has changed hands, all opinions remain my own, and no one has seen this content prior to its upload. That said, I am an affiliate of Chilkey, so any affiliate links used down in the description to make purchases for yourself will go towards supporting the channel at no additional cost to you. It's also important to note early on that the full price swing for options is pretty small. $109 for Anno Black with a 1.2mm flex cut PCB and polycarb plate, and up to $118 for a spray coat model with the non-flex cut PCB and aluminum plate. Our sample in spray coat baby blue and the flex cut assembly runs $115. ND TKL features a surprisingly enthusiast-centric layout for a brand not necessarily focused on an enthusiast crowd. F13 top row and Sengen bottom row, as well as optional stepped caps lock with your own keycaps. The exterior of the board is visually quite muscular and well sculpted compared to the rest of the ND line, and especially the PAW 65, partially by virtue of the slimmer bezels at the side and an extremely nice cherry lip or sloped front face, keeping things nice and comfy to use for most users and most keycap profiles, though it does get a touch tall right in front of the keycaps. Speaking of keycaps, the stock double shock PBT keycaps are quite nice, featuring a color match theme for our sky blue model with warm white alphas. No extra keycaps are included with the board. The stock switch for the pre-builts is the Kailh Blue Lotus Linear, a fairly bog standard switch in terms of material use and specs, with what I would call needs work on the factory lube. Most of the switches are fine, but a handful of them are less consistent than the others, and two of them I had to replace with others entirely because they were scratchy to the point of feeling like something was physically wrong with the switch, and relubing either of them didn't do anything to correct the issue. They otherwise feel and sound decent enough though. The only miss visually, and it's a near miss to be clear, comes from the embellishment between the nav cluster and arrow keys. Most of this I actually like, but the little piece of awkwardly cut plastic in there, which they advertise as a resin luminous tube module, just isn't doing it for me. There aren't many scenarios in which you will even notice this little blip of glow-in-the-dark plastic. I think the big play would be to open up the space under the top layer a bit more, set a piece of frosted acrylic there, and set some RGB LEDs on the PCB to illuminate that region. That would have actually looked far nicer than this board deserves, but I also can't speak to how much that would have impacted the cost of the board, and again, this is a nitpick at best at this price point. The big win, on the other hand, is the rear accent weight design. This is extremely pretty and looks good with any of the four colors you can get this board in, and makes me want to see this board in pink now, if I'm being honest. This also contains the center exit USB-C cutout for the daughter board, which I'm happy to report is exceptionally well machined and recessed. Also contained underneath are the batteries for wireless use, as well as the daughter board. Case closure is still handled by their ball catch system, now using updated polished hardware, and the mounting styles were updated to do away with O-ring gasket and top mount in favor of their elastic bridge mount, which uses elastic perches that sit in the case for the tabs on the PCB to rest in, sort of like a soft single-sided PCB gasket mount. They also retained silica gel tab mount, which is plate-based and fits firmly between the case halves. In testing both mounts with our example, which has the 1.2mm flex cut PCB, there wasn't really much of a difference between either mounting style, as the assembly is already pretty bouncy and flexy to begin with. I suspect the 1.6mm version might produce some notably different results. Also interesting is that my samples seem to have half of the mounting points in place for a top mount option, as well as a screwdriver and all the fasteners needed for top mount, and a plate that has holes for top mount. But top mount isn't a supported mounting style. I'm uncertain if newer models have this issue, but as I understand it, this was an accident resulting from some design and packaging decisions that were made at awkward points in time. Sound off in the comments if yours has this anomaly as well, and where/when you bought the board. Back to the 1.2mm PCB. This thing, while technically accommodating PCB mount stabs, has the same issues as ND 75 with regard to plate fitment of those stabilizers, and has several spots where SMDs are in the way of being able to use stab shims. Even if you did have stabs for 1.2mm PCBs, the site doesn't specifically mention compatibility for those anyway, and the stock plate mount stabs are largely pretty good, so just stick with those for your own sanity. Daughter board connectivity is still handled via the magnetic Pogo Pin on a ribbon cable solution, but wireless mode switching is sadly located beneath the tab key. I think in future revisions of these boards, I'd like to see this switch mounted to the daughter board and externally accessible, or at least located under a shift key or caps lock, something that's a bit less intrusive. To program the keyboard, you'll need to access the Chilkey website and use their WebDriver to adjust the board, similarly to the way VIA, Vile, and ZMK Studio function. This is a good thing as it offers a lightweight solution that's only as intense as your web browser's needs, but the downside is if you either can't access the site from where you're presently located or the site is down, you will lose the ability to address the board without using the inbuilt functions. Hot take. In the future, I'd like to see them develop their PCBs for ZMK firmware usage, as our experience with it on Canon Key's Photon was quite good, and that advertised battery life for that board was insane. As for how this board sounds, we've got 2 typing tests for you, one at stock with both mounting styles, and one modded with my preferred mounting style. It's worth mentioning that the corner bumpers for my model, while they fit fine, were actually scavenged from a different ND75 case extra that I had lying around. That is going to be getting its own lore shortly, so stay tuned for that. It's possible there are slight differences between the dimensions of the ND75 corner bumpers and ND TKL's corner bumpers that may be influencing our stock typing test. As a matter of personal preference, I definitely prefer our rebuilt configuration, as it was still quite full sounding, but allowed us to delete some of the foam to get the sound to open up a little bit more. And I would now love to see this board offered as a bare bones like ND75 is. I also ended up needing to do a force brake mod using pieces from a pack of Geon force brake pads to address case ping, again potentially related to the different corner bumpers, so take those impressions with a big grain of salt. But if you end up needing to do a force brake to this board, this is where you'd set things up for the best results. If I had to rank this amidst all the Chilkey boards I've used to date, I'd rank this pretty high all around, even considering some of the issues and oddities we encountered. Broadly speaking, even considering the 1.2mm PCB we got saddled with, this would make most users happy, and any corrections we've implemented outside of custom parts were inconsequentially expensive and non-intrusive. So overall, the only thing I'd like to see at some point is maybe a bare bones version of this board. I also think I'd like to see either plate available for either PCB. All that said, for the price, I feel like this is going to make a lot of owners pretty happy, both stock and user modified. Take care of yourselves and one another, and we'll see you all in the next video.